we have another, ex-politician. Ms. Beverley Schäfer spent 15 years in the arena of South African politics for her sins. As a former ward councillor for the city of Cape Town, she was then elected to the Provincial Parliament in 2014 and serves as the chair for the Standing Committee of Economic Opportunities, Tourism and Agriculture for 4.5 years. She was appointed to Minister of Economic Opportunities, Tourism and Agriculture under Premier Zille, where she managed the Western Cape economy. Thought the DA was not about that. Through a demand-led private sector approach to jobs and growth. And there's a whole long list of other things that Beverley has done here. She's going to tell us more about her achievements. One thing I think that stands out about Beverley to me personally is that she took a very hard road during COVID. She stood up for her beliefs. She suffered dramatically because of that. She's a woman of character. Welcome, Beverley.
Thank you very much. And just for a brief second, I'm going to wear a political hat until I absolutely thought, wow, how refreshing to actually hear the Honourable Mzweli Mani speak about practical ideas and solutions to incorporating a decentralized tool into a centralized space until the last comment. And then, of course, our ideologies differed. Because when we handed South Africa over in the new democracy, we had only 2.5 million people that were on social grants. And today, we have about 17 million. Something has gone radically wrong. So let's not blame the past. Let's blame what we've actually created in the last 2 decades. And I think one of the biggest criticisms of politicians is that we need to be accountable for what we create. And that's always a starting point to changing something. So, and then I'd just like to also add that today we have 35 million people earning less than 1,000 Rand a month. Now, that is half of our population, even more perhaps. Something has gone radically wrong. Have we changed the lives of people? And I asked that question as a politician for 15 years, even post-politics. Have we really instigated deep change within the people? Yes, we can answer, and we usually do this very well as politicians. Yes, we've given everybody electricity, almost everybody. Everybody's got running water, almost everybody. The percentages are high. But what have we done to the average individual to instigate deep change, to break that cycle of poverty? Have we made the dent? And, you know, I'm not so sure. And it's quite devastating to actually say that. I think the biggest change has actually come from the people, not necessarily from the politicians. Sometimes we're too much in the way, Honourable Mani. And I think we need to move out of it. So today I'm speaking a little bit about the ideology, and I've obviously you've heard most of this over the last 24 hours. But I think it's very important that we continue to talk about this. And so I'm talking about the decentralized freedom, reclaiming sovereignty in a rapidly changing world. Now, Ricardo Salinas, I know he's a Mexican billionaire, but he said very aptly, once you have individuals free with their own monetary assets, it's very hard to make them into slaves. Fiat fraud is what facilitates the current day slavery. And this quote is a wake-up call that perfectly captures where we are in our world today. It reminds us that financial freedom isn't just a privilege. It's actually a human right. And yet, for most of us, the right has been quietly stripped away. I've come to realize that at such a late stage in my life, I'm always a late starter in things, that this tool called Bitcoin actually has the power to fix this. And for the first time, I actually believe that to be real. To really make a dent in the lives of people. And from what I've seen here over the last 24 hours and engaged with people involved in projects, I really think we need to look at this more seriously and scale up. So I've seen this firsthand. After spending the 15 years in politics, I had a real awakening in the plandemic. And I say it again, the plandemic. I called it a day last year in election time because I felt I could work far more effectively speaking out of the system than being in it, and talking about more how I could actually protect or talk about the freedoms that we are slowly losing and is slowly being eroded. And when I talk about the plandemic, I also include projects like Agenda 2030 and the so-called, now I'm really putting myself on the line, climate change. But today, however, I'm not here as a former politician, but as someone who is deeply committed to a future where financial prosperity and sovereignty and the freedom of humanity in all forms is not just a pipe dream, but a reality. And you know, funny enough, even though I've left politics, I'm still a politically exposed person. So when December, I was sitting in Thailand opening a whole lot of Bitcoin platforms, and for goodness sake, I couldn't even get on there because they'd asked this question, have you been in politics? Yes, well, terribly sorry, you're a politically exposed person, therefore you can't open a trading platform. I found myself going from here to non-KYC Mexico and trying to speak to people about how on earth was I going to get onto these platforms. So I carry this burden of PEP for at least another 5 years. I'm even a board of directors, and even on some of these companies I can't get on because of that. So what does freedom really mean? And we had a discussion with some of us last night at the cocktail. And I thought it was very important that we actually perhaps think about that more seriously, because we do, as KG said, throw this word of freedom and liberty around like it's very loose. But as a human encompasses several key dimensions of what it means to be free. And the first one is personal autonomy. It means that there's a self-determination of one's own choices. And I just want you to think, when I talk about these words, of how much of this has been violated as we speak in the world today. It also involves freedom from coercion or external control. It talks about the ability to make decisions without undue interference. Economic freedom, control over personal finances, the right to earn, to save, to invest without systematic barriers, and the protection against arbitrary monetary manipulation. Intellectual freedom, the access to information, how many people are prevented from that? Prevented. The right to think, express, and challenge ideas. Freedom from censorship or thought suppression. Political freedom, participation in governance, the right to peaceful assembly, the protection of individual rights. Gosh, all of this has been violated. Existential freedom, the pursuit of personal meaning and purpose, the self-development without societal constraints, and the choice to define one's identity and path. So when we talk about financial sovereignty, like tools like Bitcoin, it's a critical component of human freedom, enabling individuals to escape systematic economic control and reclaim personal agency. Now, Jeff Booth, who wrote the book The Price of Tomorrow and the Truth About Inflation, he states that the current system we've been born into has never, ever been a truly free market system. And that is actually mind-blowing. And he goes on to say that that Bitcoin is imposing the first global free market the world has ever seen, allowing us to measure true deflation rates outside of a traditional system. So let's explore this together. So we're going to talk about the chains that hold us back, and then we'll delve into why we believe Bitcoin is the most important financial innovation of our time. And finally, I'll just talk to you about the road going forward. So let's start by facing a difficult truth. The financial systems we trust to manage our money do not prioritize our freedom. They prioritize more control. They coerce you with rewards and travel miles, but secretly push you deep into a system, and before you look again, it's almost impossible to get out. Basically, fiat currency is a debt-based monetary system. Quite a rude awakening to where we find ourselves. In 2015, when Greece missed the 1.6 billion payment to the International Monetary Fund, essentially defaulting on its debts, government took this 10% haircut, it was the first time I'd ever heard of that word, out of everyone's bank accounts. And so we also saw that with the Canadian convoy in 2022, and so it goes on. Closer to home in South Africa, the Reserve Bank has tied us to a currency that erodes in value year after year. Between 2010 and 23, the rand lost 60% of its purchasing power against the dollar. Now, that's not just an economic statistic. It's a story of the lives diminished, of opportunities stolen, and futures compromised. And may I just add a little caveat here? We all know that the Reserve Bank is a private entity. And when I inquired the other day to someone who was very high up in the financial banking sector for a long time, and I said, well, why do we still have exchange controls? And he kind of mumbled under his breath about money leaving the country. But let me just remind everybody here, let's not have short-term memory loss, about the plane loads of cash that have actually left this country in the last 30 years. Billions. I think I still recall the Panama Papers, where some people have even, it's listed there of how much money has also gone illegally out of the country. So I don't actually buy the idea about exchange controls. I really just believe it is all about control. However, this isn't a uniquely South African issue. It's a global problem. Governments print trillions, devaluating currencies and wiping out savings. Central banks manipulate interest rates, making it impossible for ordinary people to build lasting wealth. These systems aren't just fragile, they're designed to keep us dependent. Central banks print money to fund wars without the permission of the people and feed off fear and debt, keeping humanity in a perpetual cycle of poverty. It is through this financial system that they have been enslaving us and enslaving all of humanity for the past 2 centuries. I've seen the consequences of this dependence, and so have all of you. Whether it's retirees struggling to make ends meet or young people burdened with debt, the story is the same. But here's the amazing thing. These chains are not inevitable. They can be broken, but only once people realize that they have other options, like decentralized options to store and move money. Like him or hate him, it actually doesn't matter. What does matter is that President Trump, I believe, has set humanity on a new course, one which has taken us off the path of World War III, another massive making billion-dollar industry, and Agenda 2030, and taking us to the future of humanity, the future of humanity going forward, which I believe is now much brighter than it has ever been. There, however, will be pushbacks and diversions to try and take us back off course. But I really believe that they won't succeed. Don't focus too much on the noise out there. Right, so why does Bitcoin matter? Well, we talked about this, and many people have talked about it today. It's not a speculative asset or a get-rich-quick scheme, but it really is a tool for financial freedom. It's fundamentally different because it can't be devalued or inflated. It's censorship resistant. That's such a big thing. No government, bank, of course, or corporation can freeze it. And it's got its incredible value that under purchasing power increases with time, unlike fiat currency. But it really is much more than that about the numbers and the technology. It is about the empowerment, and may that not be such a cliche. It is about giving people control over their own money, whether they're South African professionals, Malawian farmers, or Zimbabwean entrepreneurs. It really is about taking your power back. So how do we take action? How do we move from dependence into sovereignty? And we've heard Carl talk about this idea of self-custody, not your keys, not your coins. Holding your private keys is important. But again, self-custody is about, again, taking your power back. But self-custody also requires this mind shift and education, and that I've discovered so much personally. So for decades, we were told to trust banks, to trust our bank managers, to trust governments and financial institutions, and we did that. But Bitcoin asks to take back control, to become our own banks, to undo what we think we know. You can do this with simple software wallets and even a PDF guide, and that's for those that are not sitting here and knowing about Bitcoin. Very easy to get a step-by-step process on how to. But I must say again, it's not easy. I'll admit. When I first started my Bitcoin journey, it was really late in life, and I didn't really have a clue. I made many mistakes. I lost money. I sold Bitcoin. I felt overwhelmed. In fact, I actually felt quite silly. Thought I was quite good at these things until I got to this. But here's what I've learned. I've learned that it's okay to start small. It's okay that I started late. What I've also learned is that it's okay to just be here and save consistently. Someone said to me yesterday that I learned to save through Bitcoin. Gosh, that's actually true. I didn't think about saving so much until then. I learned as I go, and I've finally learned to commit to the long game. So those who've had Bitcoin for more than 5 years have outperformed fiat savings. So the key for me and to anyone wanting to start here is commit to the long game. Africa's unique opportunity. We all know that our continent faces unique challenges. We've seen hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, currency devaluations in Malawi, rising economic inequality across the board, most of it constructed and orchestrated. But we've also seen incredible resilience. And Bitcoin offers a way out. Across Africa, people using, as we've talked about, this incredible company called Orange, sending remittances at a fraction of the cost to save wealth in a form immune to inflation and to fund essential services like education and healthcare. How incredibly inspiring. So this isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about creating a future where financial systems serve the people and not the other way around. I love that story from Kenya where communities are using Bitcoin to fund water projects and turn wasted hydro energy into distribution lines funded by Bitcoin mines. These initiatives show us what is possible when people have access to decentralized tools that empower them to solve their own problems. And James, thanks for the story, James from Simple Bitcoin, about Mike, the waiter in South Africa, who just started saving, and I'm not sure if he's here, saved just 10% of his tips in Bitcoin week after week. 8 years later, he's retired, his family is taken care of, and he's teaching others to do the same. That's not luck. That's the power of discipline. It's with some great mentorship combined with Bitcoin's unique properties. So Bitcoin thrives on participation. The sooner you start, the faster you can collectively harness its power to empower individuals and strengthening communities and driving innovation. I really love that because I believe the future of humanity is community-based. It is about this looking after our neighbors. To all of you out there, my message is, don't wait for government's nod. Government wants to centralize digital currency. Yes, I know we want to deregulate Bitcoin. But the risk, too, is that it's already showing its ugly head in countries where digital currency is used to control the masses. Think about the social credit system in China, and now even tested in parts of Canada, once a thriving liberal democratic country. Don't wait for legislation, as legislation doesn't precede action. That's a slow turning wheel and often doesn't turn. Let the Staffords of the world quietly work in the background, but that's not going to be where the start begins. Legislation sometimes, as I said, takes years, and South Africa in general is not a front runner in this kind of space. Too many interest groups, too many political views. Continue to do what you're doing. And while I say that, I understand, having come from government myself, that legislation is the map within which departments can move legally without creating wasteful expenditure. But you don't have to wait. So as I reflect upon my journey, I see a world that is rapidly changing. The systems we've trusted for generations are crumbling. Fiat currencies are losing value. Institutions are failing. And yet in this chaos, there is an extraordinary opportunity of which I am super excited about. Central banks and central systems will continue, as they have been, to drive inflation and prices up, enslaving humanity into more debt and a perpetual cycle of poverty, generation after generation. The centralized fiat system cannot operate in any other way. It's how it's been created. Booth, back to him, said that Bitcoin is bounded by energy provided in a new reference frame, but for most people creates a cognitive dissonance in many of our brains. For many, we can't grasp the unknown of the new system because we never lived it. There are no books that ever referenced it, and so everything we've ever learnt is outside of a different system, outside of a different system, he said. He also said that people find Bitcoin in their own time and when they're willing to, because it's just an open protocol. It doesn't care what you or I are saying about it right now. It's decentralized, it's secure, bounded by energy, and it's repricing the world, and if it stays decentralized and secure, then nothing will change it. And I can tell you that cognitive dissonance is probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks we find to getting people on board, and somehow we have to be able to communicate in a way that can actually break that very, very cycle. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bitcoin, as I said, is much more than a financial tool. It's an ideology. It's a call to action for a sovereign and free world, the one we were supposed to have from the beginning. It challenges us to take responsibility for our own future, to reject the comfort and false illusions of a centralized banking system, and to build something much better for ourselves and for future generations. And this message is not targeted just for Bitcoiners in the room. Yes, you are the pioneers, the light bearers that have paved the path for the world to walk. Thank you to all of you for doing so. Inspire action by building a movement and take the hand of one other person and help break the cognitive dissonance we have all had to move through. So it's a call to everyone. Whether you're just starting your journey or if you've been in this space for years, share your knowledge, be the example, and show others what's possible. I thank you.
More than